been suggested over these last days that our thoughts arise from our mind and our feelings arise from our heart. But we can ask ourselves, from where does understanding arise? There's an old story that is relevant to where we find ourselves now. To understand it, we have to dive deep into the crucible, into the mandala that contains not only all the aspects of our psyche, but also all the sacred symbols, numbers, and archetypes. So let's go there. It's the story about that great saint, the great Megid he was called, or the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the form of Hasidic Judaism. One day, the great Megid was on a pilgrimage with three of his closest Hasidim when they came to a small hamlet, a farming hamlet, nestled at the foot of a mountain. But this hamlet was the fiefdom of a certain squire, a squire who followed black magic. Now when the great Megid and his three Hasidim came into the inn, they found that the innkeeper was one of their own faith, and there was preparations being made for a celebration, because the next day the son of the owner was to be circumcised. But it was found that the owner of the inn, instead of being light-hearted and looking forward to this celebration, this ritual, so significant for them, that he was morose, he was sad, he was downhearted. And the great Megid asked him what it was that was troubling him. And he told the great Megid, I have had 7 sons before this, and each son has died on the eve of his bri, or circumcision. I fear for this my 8th child. So the great Megid gave reassurance to the innkeeper. Go, rest well, he said, but bring me a sack. And so this is what the owner of the inn did. He brought a potato sack for the great Megid. And the great Megid called his 3 Hasidim to him, and he said, tonight you must keep a vigil. You must sit at the head of the cradle of this child, and you must not sleep. You must remain alert, and then call me if something happens. So indeed, as they were instructed to do so, the 3 Hasidim sat at the head of the cradle of the young child, holding the sack. They had candles. They said their prayers to keep each other awake. But in the middle of the night, a wind came blowing through the window. But before the candles went out, the 3 Hasidim saw 2 shining, frightening green eyes appear at the window. But then the candles were blown out and there was a whooshing sound. And suddenly the three Hasidim had a screaming, screeching, hissing creature in the sack that they were holding. They quickly closed the opening to the sack, and one of them went to call the great Magid. And he came, bearing his staff. And when he came, he took the sack and beat it, roundly, with screams and screeches and squeals and hisses. And then suddenly, whatever was in the sack escaped out of the window. The next morning, the circumcision went on as had been planned, and there was great rejoicing. The son of the owner was alive and had been through the great and significant ritual. But then, as the festivities went on, the owner of the inn made the remark, we invited the squire to our celebration, but he has not come. The great Magid said, let me take to him some of the sweetmeats and goodies that have been part of our celebrating. So the great Magid, taking a small parcel, went to the house of the squire. When he knocked on the door and was admitted, he was taken into the chamber of the squire, who was lying there, bruised and bloodied and broken bandages. And the squire sneered at the great Magid and said, you are no doubt a great sorcerer and magician, and you caught me unawares. But I challenge you, because I am a great magician and sorcerer. But the great Magid said to the squire, I am no sorcerer, nor magician, but I meet your challenge. And so a date and a place was set. And of course, everyone came, all the townspeople, everyone came to see this duel. And there was the sorcerer, still bandaged and bruised, but unbeaten. And the great Magid. And the great Magid took his staff and he drew a circle around himself. And then another circle, and another circle, and another circle, until there were 7. And he stood in the middle of this circle, holding his staff. Now the sorcerer began with some incantations. He sent pestilence, spiders, scorpions, and the like. And they came to the first circle that surrounded the great Magid. And he held up his staff, and they fell into ashes. So the sorcerer had to send more. This time he sent the slithering creatures of the earth, the asps, the vipers, the adders, the snakes, and they came to the second circle around the great Magid. And again he held up his staff, and they fell into ashes. So again the next layer that was there were the things of the night, those creatures of the depths of the earth. And again, the great Magid held up his staff, and they returned to ashes. And then he called the creatures, the dragons, the evil doings of those other realms, dimensions. And again he held up his staff. Until finally there was the last circle around the great Magid. But by this time the sorcerer had run out of all of his black magic weapons. So his only recourse was to call on the fire within himself. So like a great furnace, he opened himself up to this final weapon, a great flame, a force which he directed at the great Magid. But as it came to the final circle surrounding the great Baal Shem Tov, he again held up his staff, and the fire consumed just that which was the fire itself. The sorcerer, the squire, was gone. So in this place that we can call the crucible, the mandala, in us, that holds all the facets, aspects of not only our psyche, but the psyche of all stories, just as it contains all the sacred symbols, all the archetypes, all the sacred numbers. What, from this place, for us, is this staff that we hold? What is this staff that when held up dispels, destroys, annihilates all the levels of illusion? What is it? But first, we have to find that place in us that is the crucible, is the mandala, from which arises the understanding of all stories, their meaning, their symbols, their sacredness. What is this stuff that we hold? Dive deep. Where is this crucible? Where is this mandala? We can go to any cell, any atom of our body and find it there. Go there. So when it said dive deep, what does it mean? If this crucible, this mandala is in every cell, why is it said dive deep? Why is it called understanding?